One of the passages in the Bible that's always fascinated me is Jesus when he says, I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. The gospel was meant to bring true peace, peace between man and God. So you have what's called a vertical relationship, right, between man and God. And that vertical relationship is supposed to affect horizontal relationships. If the vertical relationship is right with God, right, peace with God, that will translate to horizontal peace with man. And that is the only true solution to peace. When Jesus says, do unto others as you would have them do unto yourself, this is a formula for true peace, but it is a condensation of the Ten Commandments. Now, I've been studying through Romans, and the Ten Commandments were not meant to bring peace. The Ten Commandments were meant to bring about heightened sin, heightened awareness of sin, and increase of sin, which is not the common way of understanding biblical principles because, frankly, we have pastors that aren't teaching these things, unfortunately. So if you're a Christian that's been going to church your whole life, and this is a shock to you, buy a commentary, read Romans, and maybe find a new church. I'm not sure. That's not always the solution. Sometimes you need to stay in the church where you are. Maybe that's putting the cart in front of the horse. The lesson from this one today is going to be make the best possible peace through Christ with others. You will see on Thursday when I finish chapter 6 of Revelation that will not translate to peace for you, for sure. But the truth will be out there. So in this world, the conclusion from 6, I'll tell you now, is God is not going to allow there to be peace in this world. That was never the plan. And these debates between people who call themselves Christian but believe it's all a myth. And those that would claim there are better solutions to peace, you'll find that all of those types of visions are short-sighted. God is offering peace with him. And that is the ultimate peace. There is no real peace other than that. And if you can get that, the rest takes care of itself, because you have nothing in this world that you absolutely have to link yourself to that much. All right, so let's get into this. Now, I have my notes from the zany professor. He faxed them to me, as you know. He's usually away. And he is in Madagascar right now on an archaeological dig. And who knows, we might even hear from him. So, the 4 horsemen, destroyers of false peace. Now, the Lamb releases the seals of judgment. Then the gospel is both salvation and condemnation. Okay, so Jesus is the one who is opening these seals. It says the Lamb, the slain Lamb, is opening the seals. So this clearly is showing, once again, these people that say the God of the New Testament isn't the God of the Old Testament, that Jesus is nothing like the God of the Old Testament. Those people don't know what they're talking about. They are ignorant. Either accept the Bible or reject it. There is no middle ground. So he's opening the seals himself. These are seals of judgment. The Lamb has done this. Okay? So keep that in mind. Okay? Now, this happened, I believe, as a result of Jesus' earthly ministry. Maybe I'm being too specific there. Okay? But maybe that's debatable. But it's not, neither here nor there, really. But okay. Now, the seals are broken and horses come forth from them. Very different from a vision, okay? When you break a seal, what happens? You open a scroll, right? It says the seals are broken and these horses come out. What does that look like? What does that look like? It doesn't look like anything. It's not something that... So It's too simplistic to go to the book of Revelation and say, oh yeah, it's a vision. No, it's there's symbolism and there's visions and there's all kinds of things. This revelation is very complicated. I want to keep harping on that as often as it comes up, because I think a lot of people don't realize that there are complexities here. So to consider. Okay, so what's the first horse? The first horse is the white horse, and this is the horse of conquest and victory. And so it says that that God gives them the crown. So man goes out to arrive at peace through conquest. I think it's self-apparent that conquest is war and is actually not peace. So this idea that we would arrive at peace through conquest, which, by the way, I'm going to tell you something. You may think that sounds absurd. Prior to World War One, the idea, there's a name for this philosophy. There was this idea that man was meant to be at war. And that if you look at these old paintings and everything of the glory of war, man was meant to be at war. We were at our best when we were at war. I don't believe in that, right? But that philosophy existed. This idea that conquest was man at his best. And World War One put a stop to that real quick. But Revelation was warning about this a long time ago. That this idea that conquest leads to peace is nonsense. Very interesting. Now, the next seal that opens comes forth a red horse, okay? And this is a sign for civil war. So even if there were successful conquest, there would still be this internal strife. Globalists should take note of this. I remember when I was a kid thinking it only made sense. It only made sense that if there was just a one world government, we'd have peace. Leave it to children and socialists to come up with stupid ideas like this. No offense if you're a socialist, by the way. I understand some things look like they make sense. But do these governmental solutions really actually solve problems like strife and internal bickering and murder and all these things? I watched a made-for-TV movie. It was really actually quite good, and it was about one of the first serial killers in Russia, in Soviet Russia, that was not. There were many that weren't publicized. This is one of the ones that were publicized. I remember they were talking about it, and they went to one of the bureau chiefs, and whenever you had operations going on, there was always a representation of the Communist Party there. I forget what they were called. I thought they were called bureau chiefs, but I could be wrong. And they would be talking to them, and they would say, "Oh, there aren't serial killers in the Russia, are they?" And they said, "No, that's American opulence creates that." Well, of course, that's ridiculous. You will not have peace through conquest, and you will not have peace through civil obedience. You will have civil disobedience. It will happen, and civil war will show that won't happen. Then there's something called Pax Romana. Pax Romana was this idea that you had Roman peace. And Tacitus had a really good quote. I should have brought the book over here to read it to you. It was really interesting, where he said, when they're robbing and plundering and pillaging, they claim that they're trying to achieve peace. And only when there's a desert remaining do they claim that there is peace. It's really interesting. So this whole idea that Pax Romana, there was Roman peace. Well, no. And in fact, in the New Testament, you see there was much strife despite Pax Romana. And then you have the Old Testament false prophets. And the false prophets of the Old Testament were declaring peace when God had clearly judged them and was not allowing for peace. The people refused to repent. So since repentance was part of the prophecy, the true prophecy, these false prophets were like, yeah, this is all going to pass. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. So this idea that there's going to be civil peace, it's just as long as these, again, you're seeing that God is breaking down and destroying these false notions of peace. That, oh, if we just had conquest, we would have peace. Well, if we had just had civil obedience, we would have peace. What about civil war? Those things will still happen. The third horse of the apocalypse, the black horse, and it says, this is so interesting, he has scales. And what that means is that you're paying famine prices. So this idea that, well, we would have peace if we could get rid of economic strife. And it says, this idea that, what would happen though if someone made you pay famine prices? And it said, don't touch the oil, and that's the idea that these goods that only rich people have access to, they have in great abundance while others are starving. Is that peace? So you have this idea we have peace if we can only get a conquest down. You have the idea we would have peace if we could only get civility down, internal civility. And we would have peace if there just wasn't any economic strife. As if everything's going to be balanced all the time perfectly. Now, I'm not arguing for, do not misunderstand me, I am not arguing for an anti-socialist position or a pro-capitalist position. I'm not wasting my time with that. I have personal beliefs on those things, obviously. But that's not what Revelation is talking about here. Revelation is talking about creating peace that doesn't actually exist. That can't exist. There will be no peace in this world, is what it's telling us. Even if you have peace with God, which is the only peace that matters, when you try to apply that horizontally, we're going to see in the second half of chapter 6, that also will not ultimately lead to peace. Finally, the pale horse. And that the color was our word for chlorine. And it means yellowish green. What is that? Well, that's obviously the color of death. This is really interesting. And it says, following behind him is Hades, which is very similar to Old Testament notions of a place after death, a grave. And what this is saying is there won't even be peace after death. So unless you find peace with God through Christ, there will be no peace ever of any kind. I remember I'm going to close with this. I was did my first funeral. The guy had no children. His wife had passed away. All of the extended family had to take care of the service. And it wasn't anything like any other service I would do. The other service, there was much grieving and sadness. This service, only this old man was sad. And it was awful. He was just crying. This woman was everything to him. He had no children. Who knows why they didn't have children? I felt bad for him. And I went to visit with him, and the last thing he wanted was a preacher to visit him. And so I went to sit in the living room, and he just turned his TV up as loud as he could get it. I knew something was wrong with him. I had found out and heard through the grapevine that he had pneumonia and refused treatment. And then he contracted pneumonia again and refused treatment. This was a perfectly healthy man. I mean, he was old, but he was healthy. And he committed suicide. And many think there are fates worse than death. I agree with that. I think there are fates worse than death in many ways. And what this is saying is even death won't bring peace. It is quite a message, and one that I don't think should be taken lightly.